In 1998, a man was found unconscious in a laboratory, surrounded by hundreds of glass jars containing nothing but concentrated human sweat and pungent armpit residue. He wasn't a victim of a crime, he was a professional odor tester, and he had simply smelled too much. The sheer volume of olfactory input had pushed his sensory system into a state of temporary shutdown. How does a human being reach a point where their daily existence revolves around the olfactory analysis of human decay and chemical stench? It's a question that haunts the edges of our understanding of modern labor. We often think of work as a path to purpose, a way to contribute to the grand tapestry of human progress, but for some, work is a slow, grueling descent into the grotesque. Consider the sensory overload of someone whose entire career depends on identifying the exact moment a deodorant fails or a fragrance loses its top note. They don't just smell, they grade the intensity of human odor on a scale that most of us would find physically repulsive, a scale that measures everything from the nutty notes of lactic acid to the sharp, ammonia-heavy sting of bacterial proliferation. It's a job that requires you to dissociate from your own biology, to treat the natural, often embarrassing decay of the human body as a cold, sterile data point in a spreadsheet. But that wasn't even the worst part. The psychological toll of living in a world of constant, artificial evaluation of scent is profound. These testers spend their days inhaling the most intimate and often unpleasant aspects of human existence, all in the name of corporate product testing. They are the silent sentinels of our hygiene, the invisible gatekeepers of the products we use to mask our own humanity, yet we never speak their names or consider the cost of their labor. It's a chilling reminder that your morning routine, your confidence, and your social acceptability are supported by someone else's sensory sacrifice. Imagine the lingering phantom smells that follow them home, the way they must scrub their own skin with neutral cleansers just to feel human again. They live in a state of sensory purgatory, constantly scrubbing their olfactory palate to ensure the next batch of sweat is judged with clinical precision. And then, something even more disturbing happened as we began to peel back the layers of these niche professions. We realized that the human condition is often sold for pennies, treated as a resource to be harvested or a mechanism to be exploited. Imagine walking into a subway station in the heart of a bustling metropolis, but instead of a standard morning commute, you are greeted by someone whose sole job is to shove your body into a train carriage until the doors can barely close. This isn't a scene from a dystopian novel or a nightmare sequence in a film, it is the daily reality of the Osha in Japan. These subway pushers are tasked with the physical compression of human beings, a process that feels less like public transit and more like a mass-scale objectification of the living. Why do we accept this? Why is the efficiency of a train schedule deemed more important than the personal space and physical dignity of the passengers? The pushers wear white gloves, a chilling, almost surgical contrast to the desperate, claustrophobic environment they maintain. They aren't just staff, they are the gears in a machine that views human cargo as something to be packed, sorted, and moved with the same indifference one might show to logs of wood or crates of produce. The tension in the air at a Tokyo train station is palpable, a silent, collective scream of thousands of people forced into a space far too small for them. The pushers watch, waiting for the signal to apply force, turning people into nothing more than matter to be manipulated. It is a brutal dance of physics and desperation, where the human body is reduced to a geometric problem of volume and pressure. The pushers must be strong, yes, but they must also be emotionally detached, able to ignore the panicked eyes and the muffled protests of those they are squeezing into the steel belly of the train. It's a job that effectively erases the boundary between personhood and property. But the story doesn't end with the commute. Beneath the surface of our leisure, there are even stranger, darker worlds. Have you ever considered the fate of the millions of golf balls that vanish into the murky depths of lakes and ponds on golf courses every year? They don't just disappear. They are reclaimed by the professional golf ball diver. This is not a hobbyist's pastime, it is a high-stakes, dangerous profession involving murky, stagnant waters filled with unknown hazards. These divers spend hours submerged in dark, sludge-filled ponds, searching for the white spheres that represent lost potential. What lies beneath those waters? It's a graveyard of lost things, a murky, oxygen-deprived ecosystem where the diver is an intruder in a silent, suffocating world. They describe the sensation of reaching into the mud and feeling things that aren't golf balls, sharp, rusted debris, jagged rocks, discarded fishing gear, decaying aquatic life, and perhaps, evidence of things long forgotten by the world above. The isolation of being underwater, cut off from the light of the sun, creates a psychological isolation that few can endure. They are hunting for plastic and rubber in the dark, a metaphor for a life spent searching for value in the waste of others. These divers risk infections from stagnant water, encounters with aggressive wildlife, and the constant threat of getting snagged on hidden underwater structures. It is a lonely, dirty, and dangerous existence, performed in the shadows of pristine, manicured greens where wealthy patrons play their games, completely unaware of the person crawling through the silt just a few feet away. And then, we turn to the most bizarre of all, the professional sleeper. Yes, people are paid to sleep. It sounds like a dream, a utopia for the perpetually exhausted, but the reality is a clinical nightmare of sensors, wires, and constant observation. These individuals are the test subjects of our modern obsession with sleep quality and pharmaceutical enhancement. They spend their nights in windowless rooms, hooked up to monitors that track every twitch, every breath, and every flicker of eye movement. They are stripped of their autonomy, their rest turned into a commodity for pharmaceutical companies and mattress manufacturers. It's a violation of the most private act of human life. They are watched by scientists who treat their dreams as data, their unconscious states as a market research opportunity. Why do we feel the need to commodify even our deepest, darkest periods of rest? The professional sleeper lives in a state of suspended animation, a human battery being drained for the sake of profit. They are told when to lie down, when to wake, and what substances to ingest to see how their biology reacts. In the silence of the lab, their brainwaves are mapped and scrutinized, their REM cycles dissected like a specimen on a slide. They are literally selling their subconscious to the highest bidder, allowing corporations to peer into the very mechanism of human restoration. It is a strange form of exploitation, where the most vulnerable state of being, vulnerability itself, is turned into a profitable, repeatable business model. As we look at the compensation for these roles, the truth becomes even more unsettling. Some earn a pittance, barely enough to cover the cost of their own basic needs, while others are paid handsomely to sacrifice their health, their dignity, and their sanity. Is the money really worth the loss of self? The disparities in pay reveal a dark hierarchy of human labor, where the most degrading jobs are often the most essential to the smooth functioning of our consumerist society. We have created a society that thrives on the exploitation of the bizarre, the hidden, and the uncomfortable. We pay people to do what we are too afraid or too disgusted to do ourselves. We hire the pushers so we don't have to acknowledge the overcrowding of our cities. We hire the divers so we don't have to acknowledge the waste of our leisure. We hire the testers so we don't have to acknowledge the biological reality of our own odors. But what happens to the person when the job is done? When the scent of the lab fades, when the train doors finally open, when the diver emerges from the sludge, and when the sleeper wakes from their monitored slumber? They carry the weight of these experiences, the residue of a life spent in the service of the strange. There is a psychological scarring that comes with being a professional object, a human tool. They carry the memories of the dark water, the phantom pressure of the train carriage, and the clinical coldness of the monitoring wires. They are left with a haunting realization: the world is held together by people whose jobs we cannot imagine, and whose sacrifices we rarely acknowledge. There are secrets buried in the mud of those golf ponds, and there are stories written in the sweat of the testers that have never been told. If we are willing to pay for these services, what does that say about our own humanity? Are we just spectators to a tragedy of labor, or are we the ones driving these individuals into the shadows through our insatiable demand for perfection, convenience, and health? What happens when the demand for these bizarre roles exceeds the supply of those willing to lose themselves? And what is the one job, currently being kept in the absolute dark, that would shatter your perception of reality if you saw it with your own eyes? Consider the content moderators who scrub the darkest, most violent imagery from the internet, or the cadaver cleaners who arrive after the police have left a scene, or the night shift infrastructure testers who walk beneath our cities in the decaying tunnels of our subway systems to ensure we don't collapse. We live in a world layered with invisible, often harrowing work. Every time you open a bottle of perfume, every time you board a train, every time you buy a box of balls, every time you tuck yourself into bed, you are interacting with the end result of someone else's grueling, often dehumanizing labor. It is a cycle of consumption that relies on keeping the most difficult parts of existence out of sight and out of mind. We have built our comfort on the foundation of their discomfort. The question remains, are we capable of changing this, or are we destined to keep pushing, diving, and sleeping our way through a world that treats people like replaceable parts? The professional odor tester, the subway pusher, the golf ball diver, and the professional sleeper are not anomalies, they are the symptoms of a society that has lost its connection to the human cost of its own convenience. They are the individuals who have been pushed to the edges of the map, tasked with doing the work that keeps the machine running, regardless of the toll it takes on their bodies or their minds. As you go about your day, look closely at the products you use and the services you consume. Ask yourself who had to touch, clean, test, or move that item before it reached your hands. There is a story behind everything, and more often than not, it is a story of someone who had to sacrifice a piece of themselves just so you could have a slightly better day. We are all complicit in this silent, global trade of labor, and the true cost is far higher than the price tag on the shelf. The next time you find yourself frustrated by a minor inconvenience, remember the person who is likely being paid to ensure you never have to deal with the real, messy reality of the world. We are living in a fragile, constructed reality, held together by the sweat, the pressure, the mud, and the dreams of those we choose to ignore. What will happen when they finally decide they have had enough? What happens when the shadows start to speak back? We may never know, because the system is designed to keep them working, keep them quiet, and keep them hidden, leaving us in our blissful, manufactured ignorance, unaware of the true, dark price of our modern, comfortable lives. The machinery of our world is fueled by these hidden lives, and until we choose to look behind the curtain, we will remain trapped in this cycle of invisible sacrifice, forever dependent on the people whose names we will never know and whose burdens we refuse to share.